This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The strike by workers at Manitoba Public Insurance is headed into its third week. That's having an impact on businesses that rely on MPI's services, including driving schools. As CBC's Emily Brass reports, instructors made their voices heard today as they call for an end to the strike.
Thank you.
A warm welcome for driving school instructors as they joined MPI employees on the picket lines. They say the ongoing strike is hitting their small businesses hard.
Nothing's happening, and this is affecting our business as well. Right now, our business is down about 80%.
Instead of doing like 4 lessons a day or 5 lessons a day, I'm reduced to like 1 lesson to 2. Even some days there's nothing. So it's a lot.
Many of the driving instructors say they're self-employed business owners and can't collect EI. They're calling on the province to sit down with the union and work things out. Instructors say the strike is keeping customers from signing up for lessons.
Please do something because it is affecting our work and we have to feed our families too.
Driving instructors say they're not only worried about the impact of the strike on their businesses, they're also worried about how it's affecting their students. Pragati Vora says she learned to drive over the summer so she could get to college by car this fall. She says it takes twice as long to get to campus by bus, and with the strike dragging on, she can't get her license.
I came here more than 2 times to submit my document, but I don't able to submit all the document, so I'm irritated from it.
Instructors are also worried about what might happen out on the roads. MPI has been hiring people to fill in as road test examiners.
Normally, an examiner would be trained for 6 to 8 weeks, and they're doing this in like 1 week, and we don't think that's very safe.
The union representing MPI employees says the instructors' support boosts its members' spirits. MGEU is planning a big rally tomorrow outside the legislature. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
MPI says it stands by its replacement examiners and says they're being fully trained. It says the only people being booked for road tests right now are those whose tests were postponed or cancelled by the strike. 4,000 workers at Superstore, No Frills and Extra Foods in Manitoba have voted overwhelmingly in favour of striking. The members of United Food and Commercial Workers Local 97 voted 97% in favor of hitting the picket line. The union says during the pandemic, workers were treated like heroes. Now morale and working conditions have deteriorated. Talks continue today. Their contract expires September 28th. Dozens of members of the Canadian Union of Public Employees also rallied outside of Extendicare, Oakview Place. They're calling for a fair deal. They are long-term care workers who say there is a disparity in wages between those in the public system and those who work for Extendicare. Gina McKay is CUPE's Manitoba president. She says during the pandemic, long-term care workers were treated as heroes, but now that has changed.
They deserve respect and they deserve a fair deal. Absolutely. Instead of recognizing the sacrifices that they've made, we see the employer cutting hours when whittling away their incomes.
This was the first in a number of information rallies CUPE says it plans to hold during negotiations. Peter Nygaard will face fewer charges at his upcoming sexual assault trial in Toronto. The number of charges against the former fashion mogul has been reduced from 11 to 6. Court heard some complainants are no longer expected to testify. Jury selection was set to get underway today for Nygaard's trial. That has now been postponed to next week. Nygaard was originally facing 8 charges of sexual assault and 3 charges of forcible confinement in this Toronto case. He has denied all allegations against him. People living in northwest Winnipeg say they need transit service, but the city says they won't get it for at least a year. CBC's Cameron McLean reports residents came down to City Hall today to voice their concerns with councillors.
If you live here in northwest Winnipeg, chances are your walk to the bus is farther than most people in Winnipeg. Sukhinder Sandhu came to City Hall, where councillors and transit officials discussed expanding service to 4 neighbourhoods on the city's outskirts, including Castleberry Meadows and Waterford Green.
We have a lot of Punjabi, Indian, and Filipino families. They all have elder parents and young kids going to school. So not having a bus service in those 2 communities is a lot problem.
Sandhu lives in the Waterford Green neighborhood. He says this bus stop at the corner of Adsum and Keewatin is the closest to him and many people who live in the neighborhood. People who live in the west part of Castleberry Meadows have to walk more than 30 minutes to get here.
Winnipeg Transit has proposed this route to connect the 2 neighbourhoods to Garden City Shopping Centre. But there's one problem. The service doesn't have enough drivers.
Drivers that we need for the fall change are 1,002, and we're at about 907 active operators. Okay. So we're about 95 drivers short.
The department has gone on a hiring blitz, hiring more than 100 drivers this year so far. The problem is keeping them. The union says conditions on the job are driving people away.
Roughly about 50 operators have resigned from transit. That doesn't include those that have chosen to retire. People have had enough with the treatment that they're experiencing from the unruly passengers and members of management, and they're leaving.
Transit has started printing recruitment materials in other languages like Punjabi and Tagalog. A report on recruitment efforts is expected in November. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Progressive Conservatives are promising even more tax cuts for Manitobans if re-elected. Today's announcement includes relief some businesses have been wanting for decades. The CBC's Ian Fraze explains.
Rob Reid is happy one tax may get extinguished.
At the end of the day, I'm being penalized for employing more people and growing my business.
Rob Reid sells and services fire extinguisher products. He liked hearing this promise Monday from the Tories.
A re-elected PC government will eliminate the payroll tax in 8 years.
The tax charges employers a percentage of their payroll. For Reid, that's 5 figures.
It's a bigger hit, and it's every year.
Cutting the tax completely will cost the province $440 million. It's the latest tax cut the PCs have promised this election campaign. They'd also cut in half the lowest income tax brackets and remove the land transfer tax for first-time homebuyers. Stephenson isn't worried about eventually losing $1 billion in revenue annually.
Creating jobs will also create larger revenues to the provincial government to help us make life more affordable for Manitobans and be able to make those investments in healthcare, education, roads, social services.
The NDP stressed the Tory plan would take years.
I think Heather Stephenson and I agree on one thing, which is that now is not the time for her proposal. That's why she's going to wait 8 years to bring it in. And that's why we're saying job one is to fix healthcare in Manitoba.
On that front, the NDP announced it'll push for Manitobans to build ERs and other infrastructure rather than bringing in workers from elsewhere.
We have tradespeople out of work here in the province, even as we're building big infrastructure. It makes no sense.
NDP leader Wab Kinew says his government would prioritize local companies when tenders are issued. Kinew wouldn't say if the province would pay more for local.
I have full confidence in the working people of Manitoba that not only can they be competitive on price, but they can deliver higher quality compared to people from out of province.
Back in downtown Winnipeg, Stephenson was hearing cheers and jeers from striking public sector workers down below.
Manitobans make ends meet.
Stephenson claims she did not notice.
I don't hear anything, Carol. I just hear you talking.
Election day is October 3rd. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Remember, you can watch Manitoba's 3 main party leaders go head-to-head right here at 6 p.m. on September 21st. We're teaming up with CTV and Global to bring you an hour-long, commercial-free provincial leaders debate. It will be moderated by Mary Agnes Welch from Probe Research with questions from a panel of journalists. We'll also bring you live analysis immediately following that debate at 7 p.m. You can watch that on our website, on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel as well. A Winnipeg drop-in centre is closing after more than 30 years of service. Volunteers at Our Place, Chez Nous, voted to shutter the centre after growing safety concerns for the senior staffers. The Point Douglas area drop-in offered free clothing, food, or a cup of coffee to community members in need. It was run by a group of volunteers, mostly in their 70s and 80s. Board co-chair John Tanner says the city's growing mental health and drug crisis has gotten worse since COVID-19 lockdowns.
With COVID, are being closed down, and the increased violence that is rampant throughout the city, that it is, in fact, more dangerous.
Tanner says other organizations in the neighborhood still serve the community. A stretch of Sargent Avenue was closed after a vacant house caught fire this afternoon. Fire crews were called to the house near Sargent and Maryland Street around 2 o'clock. Plumes of black smoke could be seen in the West End. Firefighters were able to bring the fire under control in less than an hour. The city says an emergency demolition took place to ensure firefighters could extinguish the fire. A 23-year-old man is dead after a shooting in the North End. Officers were called to Mountain Avenue between Powers and Mackenzie just before 1 o'clock Sunday morning. They found a man suffering from a gunshot wound. He was taken to hospital in critical condition, where he died. Police have identified the victim as 23-year-old Everett Patterson King. 21-year-old Dartashan Francesco Martin Pakachuk is charged with second-degree murder. And I should say that name again. It is 21-year-old D'Artagnan Francesco Martin Pakaluk, who is charged with second-degree murder. My apologies on that. More than 75 trucks took part in a fundraiser for Special Olympics Manitoba over the weekend, driving in a convoy Saturday around the city's perimeter and raising at least $50,000 for Manitoba Special Olympics.
This is I think it's the 15th annual truck ride in support of Special Olympics. It's being put on by the Manitoba Trucking Association and all of our sponsors, our trucks, and we get about 75 trucks out on the road today, and they're going to do a loop around the perimeter, and they're going to raise about $50,000 for Special Olympics today. So we had more trucks than last year. And a bunch of athletes from Special Olympics were here, and they were out passing out certificates to the drivers, and Team Manitoba from Special Olympics was here. So it was good.
And yes, it was good. How about the weather coming ahead? Our weather specialist Ethan Williams joined us now with a look at some rainfall amounts over the past little while.
Well, Janet, a rainy last day or so here, especially in portions of Westman where we saw upwards of 15 millimeters in some locations. Brandon and Verdon kind of just getting over the 10 millimeter mark. If you were in Wawanesa or Hamiota, getting kind of around the 10 millimeter mark or so. But that is definitely out of our hair today. Those storms and showers have left, keeping us mostly sunny through a good chunk of the province today. Just some light cloud cover sort of here and there. But that air on the other side of that system and that sunshine keeping things cool, much cooler than we've seen sort of these past few days. Mid-teens is really the best we could do through a good chunk of Manitoba today. And if you were in northwestern Ontario, you didn't even get there. Struggled to kind of get above that 12, 13 degree mark. A little breezy at times today in the Winnipeg area. Those gusts from the northeast upwards of around 30 kilometers an hour. But overall, high pressure really keeping things under control and clear overnight, especially tonight, is what we're going to be seeing too. And those temperatures going to be dipping down close to the freezing mark in some spots, and that means there's a good chance of a frost tonight in much of southern Manitoba, including both Brandon and Winnipeg. Tomorrow, though, we will see temperatures sort of a little bit warmer than we saw this afternoon. I think we'll see another sunny day as that high pressure kind of stays in place, but that starts to break down as we head through Wednesday, and that's when our next weather maker begins to move in. Some cloud cover in northern and western sections as a low pressure system develops in the northern Saskatchewan, and it makes its way into Manitoba as we head through Thursday. Maybe some showers kind of overnight into Thursday in the Winnipeg area, but most of the rain is going to be centralized in northern Manitoba, where we'll see general amounts in sort of that 5 to 10 millimeter range overall. And of course, south of there, probably lower amounts. I don't think we're looking for too much in southern Manitoba. Winds picking up a little bit tomorrow, especially in portions of the north and the west, where we could see gusts in the 40 range. But then as that system starts to move in as we head through Wednesday and Thursday, that's when Winnipeg and kind of eastern sections will start to see possibly the 40 to 50 range in total. Now, these next few days here in Winnipeg, again, I think we are looking for a bit of a warm-up tomorrow, or at least kind of in similar temperatures to what we saw in the Winnipeg area today, but staying sunny. A little bit of cloud cover moving in for Wednesday, but that's when the warm-up begins. We'll probably get back over that 20-degree mark, which is about normal for this time of year. A little bit breezy as well in advance of that system, bringing some morning showers through on Thursday. And again, there's just a slight chance of that in the afternoon before we start to see that move out, and then clearing conditions for the rest of the week. Your full Manitoba forecast and your Winnipeg 7-day forecast, Janet, coming up a little bit later.
Thanks so much, Ethan Williams. Hundreds of people gathered at the Forks yesterday to celebrate recovery. Sunday was National Recovery Day, a national day to bring awareness to Canadians who are on a journey to recover from addictions and addiction-related problems. The day-long program at the Forks included music, speeches, and community outreach.
Recovery was anonymous for a number of years, and I think we need to have a voice now to show that recovery is attainable and sustainable. So Recovery Day is a day to bring families together, the resource people, some musicians, food trucks, and just have a great day celebrating recovery and ending the stigma around mental health and addiction.
There's a chance that you'll recover as well.
You have a heart attack, you get cancer, there's immediate care. You have an addiction, which is not a moral issue, it's a health issue, it's a disease. We don't have immediate care for people. They wait too long, they wait in ERs, there's no detox beds, there's not enough treatment beds, and we're not providing the services in a full spectrum. And I'm hoping, for once, that governments hear that they should listen to the people that are experienced and that have lived on the street and been on the street and been doing this a long time, because we can give them direction that they can't do from on the inside.
I've been homeless. I was a user out on the streets, and I just want to say, just a little bit of kindness goes such a long way, and it can help someone get into a position where they're actually better off and ready to recover, just humanizing people on the streets and not judging them for their addictions. Part of recovery means, unfortunately, cutting out some old influences, some friends, and people that you consider family. Going to meetings, doing the steps, staying connected. I'm in treatment, and bit by bit, life gets better. Old troubles slip away, and happiness comes back in the form of people and community.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Opening arguments are underway in the trial of a man accused of killing 4 members of a Muslim family in Ontario. Now, community members have gathered in the London courthouse to watch the trial being held in another city. We'll show you what happened earlier today when we return. Arguments are now underway in the trial of a man accused of killing 4 members of a Muslim family in London, Ontario. Prosecutors laid out their case today, saying Nathaniel Veltman deliberately rammed his truck into the family out for an evening walk, and they allege it was an act of terrorism. The CBC's Chris Ensing reports.
Inside the transport van, 22-year-old Nathaniel Veltman on trial for first-degree murder, attempted murder, and terrorism. Prosecutors allege he deliberately set out to kill a Muslim family because of his beliefs rooted in white supremacy, laying out their case to the jury, saying the accused spent 3 months planning this attack, that he was inspired by white supremacist manifestos, and that on June 6, 2021, he went searching for Muslims to kill. That night in London, Ontario, the Afzal family, Muslims from Pakistan, went out for an evening walk. Prosecutors say the accused saw the clothes the Afzals were wearing, mounted the curb in the truck that he was driving, and deliberately hit them, killing 15-year-old Yumna Afzal, her parents Medea Salman and Salman Afzal, and grandmother Talat. A young boy survived. Family and friends of the Afzals in court today as the boy's uncle went on stand, telling the jury that he helped the Afzals come to Canada from Pakistan and that they were a peace-loving Muslim family he spoke with daily. According to the Crown's opening statement, Veltman told police that he wanted to go on a rampage, that he did not regret what he did, admitted it was terrorism, and that it was politically motivated. Prosecutors say evidence found by police after searching his house include documents where the accused writes that he is a white nationalist who wanted to inspire others.
A jury trial is like a play. Think of it as Shakespearean. There are going to be 3 acts here. There's the Crown. That's Act 1 is the Crown presents its case. Act 2 is the defense presents its case if it chooses to. And Act 3 is the charge to the jury and the verdict. So you just have to be patient.
Veltman pleaded not guilty to all charges. This trial is expected to last 8 weeks. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is supposed to be back in Canada tonight after a G20 meeting in India. But he is still in New Delhi because of issues with his plane. He and his delegation are waiting for another plane or for the original plane to get fixed. But as Evan Dyer reports, that wait is uncomfortable because of events involving Sikhs in Canada.
Well, this has been a very uncomfortable stay in India for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, not only because it's been fraught with tension with the Indian government, including a very uncomfortable meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and lots of criticism from the pro-Modi press and television here in India over the Khalistani or Sikh separatist issue, but also because it's been quite a bit longer than intended because of the breakdown of the Canadian plane, CFC-01, which is the Prime Minister's Airbus. That plane had a malfunction when many of the delegation were already at the military part of Delhi Airport preparing to leave. And since then, we have all been stranded here waiting to return to Canada. And in the meantime, the government has been moving various pieces around to try to get the Prime Minister back in time for the Liberal caucus retreat and to finally get out of India. At the same time, of course, the pressure on the Prime Minister being here in India is only mounting because an event has happened in Canada that would have happened after the Prime Minister left India had things gone to plan. But instead is happening with him here, and that is a non-binding referendum held by Sikh separatists in Surrey, BC, which drew out over 130,000 Sikhs to vote in favor of an independent Sikh state carved out of Indian Punjab. Of course, that here is an absolutely radioactive topic. The group that held it, Sikhs for Justice, is a legal group in Canada, but is an illegal group here in India. And there have been images of some of the rallies occurring in BC and some of the voting on Indian television and social media, just inflaming the anger of Indian nationalists and Modi supporters with Canada and its Prime Minister. So yet another reason to get out of India as soon as possible. Evan Dyer, CBC News, New Delhi.
Friday's earthquake in Morocco is now known to have killed nearly 2,700 people. Some of the worst affected locations are remote villages south of the city of Marrakesh. Rescue teams, both local and international, are scrambling to see if they can find any survivors under the rubble. But as CBC's Chris Brown reports, that is now a race against time.
We've reached the village of Imantala high up in the Atlas Mountains after a difficult, very long 3-hour drive up from Marrakesh, and the damage here is the worst that we've seen. Just have a look around. Everything is absolutely crushed. Not a building is standing. And if you come up behind me here, an entire slab of the mountain, huge boulders, but really just the entire side of the mountain has fallen down, crushing buildings, homes where people were sleeping in. And obviously the work of getting underneath that, it's really hard to comprehend how they're going to do it. But over here you've got crews that have finally arrived from overseas. There's teams from Britain, there's teams from Qatar, there's teams from Spain, and they've got sniffer dogs, and they're going through that, still hoping to find some signs of life. Local officials told us that already 100 people in this village alone have died, and there may be another 10 more in some of these buildings that need to be recovered. But time really is running out. We're approaching the 72-hour mark. The earthquake hit Friday night, so anyone who's buried wouldn't have had access to water for that time, and that really is a threshold that search crews try to keep in mind because after that the odds of survival drop off exponentially. Chris Brown, CBC News in Imintala, Morocco.
Moroccans living here in Manitoba are worried about their loved ones back home. Fouad Diaf is the vice president of the Atlas Moroccan Association of Manitoba. His brother and mother live near the epicenter of the earthquake.
And so I received a call from a member of my family, and he asked me if I heard what happened in Morocco, and I said, no, what happened? He said there was an earthquake, but my brother told me, who lives there, he told me, like, this was really, really shaky, and he told me that my mom could not even move from, like, she wanted to go out, but she got kind of immobilized because she was shocked. She could not walk, and so he had to go and bring her out himself, and they had to spend the night outside.
Mr. Diaf says this latest earthquake is bringing back memories, especially for his mother, who experienced a similar strong earthquake that rocked Morocco back in 1960. Libya is asking for international help after severe flooding in the eastern part of the country. The government says as many as 2,000 people are believed to have died, and thousands of others are unaccounted for. Video posted to social media shows the cities of Al Baida and Benghazi partially underwater. Communities have been cut off by the flooding and the destruction it caused. Communications almost impossible. The disaster is a result of Storm Daniel, which also wreaked havoc in Greece for 3 days. The Libyan government has declared a state of extreme emergency. A perilous rescue is unfolding now in one of the world's deepest caves, this time in Turkey. Crews are working to bring out an American researcher who fell ill 9 days ago deep inside Taurus Mountains. Mark Dickey is an experienced cave explorer, but he started suffering from severe stomach bleeding while he was 1,000 meters underground. Doctors had to stabilize the 40-year-old's condition before he could be taken out on a stretcher. Rescuers only managed to hoist him up partway over the weekend. They hope to make it to the surface by tonight. The British government is facing calls to label China as a threat. This after recent revelations that a UK Parliament researcher was arrested in March over suspicions of spying for Beijing. So far, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has resisted calls for a tough stand against China. But he says Britain needs to align its approach with the US, Canada, and other allies. Abby Kuavasan explains.
London police confirm they arrested 2 people on espionage charges back in March, but this became public knowledge over the weekend when British media outlets reported that one of the suspects was a parliamentary researcher who worked here for several years. It's a British man in his 20s who had access to sensitive materials, including classified documents. And this morning, through his lawyer, he released a statement saying that he's completely innocent and that he's worked throughout his entire career to highlight the threat and challenge of the Chinese Communist Party. Today, the Speaker of the House warned MPs from commenting on these media reports.
We do not discuss the details of security issues on the floor of the House. This is an ongoing, sensitive investigation, and members will of course understand that public discussion will be wholly inappropriate.
The other suspect is a man in his 30s. The Chinese embassy here in the United Kingdom says all of these reports are malicious slander. Now, these arrests were made in March. That was before espionage laws were updated here in the United Kingdom. The National Security Act passed in July, and that labels foreign interference as a crime. That includes election meddling as well as disrupting parliamentary work on behalf of a hostile nation. Some MPs, Tory MPs, have urged the Prime Minister to label China as a threat. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has been reluctant to do that. Previously, he did say Beijing was a challenge, and he said over the weekend he did talk to the Chinese Premier about these concerns.
We discussed a range of things, and I raised areas where there are disagreements, and this is just part of our strategy to protect ourselves, protect our values and our interests, to align our approach to China with that of our allies like America, Australia, Canada, Japan and others.
Sunak mentioning Canada there. Ottawa did recently launch an inquiry into foreign interference. This is an issue that many Western nations are grappling with. They're trying to figure out, particularly when it comes to China, how to engage, how to compete, and how to confront. Abby Kuadas, CBC News, London.
September 11th, the anniversary of the deadliest terror attack on the United States. 4 passenger planes filled with innocent passengers crashed on this day 22 years ago. Up next, we'll have more on how Americans are marking 9/11. This is the anniversary of the deadliest terror attack ever on the United States. It began when 2 planes filled with passengers flew into the World Trade Center in New York City 22 years ago today. The CBC's Magda Gabrisalasa has more on how Americans marked 9/11.
Flowers, flags, and bells being rung. That is just some of the sights and the sounds at ceremonies to remember the victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. It was 22 years ago that the plane struck New York's Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and crashed in an open field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. At the main ceremonies, you had family members and dignitaries coming together. President Joe Biden was missing from any of those ceremonies as he made his way back from Asia. But to commemorate the anniversary, he did arrive in Alaska to meet with troops and their families.
I join you on this solemn day to renew our sacred vow. Never forget. Never forget. We never forget.
First Lady Jill Biden was at the National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial, and Vice President Kamala Harris was at the ceremony in New York. And as is done every year, there were moments of silence, and the names of the victims were read out loud.
Kenneth William Busnicki.
Even though it's been 22 years since the attacks, still there are more than 1,000 remains that have yet to be identified. Just recently, through DNA testing, the remains of 2 more people were identified. Now, over the years, there have been other deaths connected to the attacks. There have been 9/11 related illnesses that first responders have been dealing with, and many of them, reportedly hundreds, have died. So the 9/11 attacks, all that was lost, and the lasting impact of that day continue to be felt by so many across the country. Magda Gabrisalasa, CBC News, Washington.
Time to head back to Saskatchewan and check in with Ethan Williams, who's filling in for meteorologist John Sauter today. Ethan's going to tell us about some warmer temperatures coming our way.
Well, the warmer weather is coming our way, Janet. We see this ridge kind of built into the upper atmosphere, bringing some 20-degree plus temperature to portions of Alberta and Saskatchewan. That ridge going to break down a little bit as it makes its way eastward into Manitoba, but some nicer temperatures coming in these next few days here before we see a little bit of a trough start to develop heading into Thursday in portions of northern Manitoba. Now, for northwestern Ontario tonight, while a lot of us are going to be seeing those clear conditions, likely still going to be a bit cloudy with a chance of showers in many locations, including both Kenora and Dryden tonight. A little further north in Red Lake, you'll see those clearing conditions, but there is the risk of frost, and that is also the case for portions of Winnipeg and southeastern Manitoba as well. 3 degrees seems to kind of be the lucky number that we're looking for tonight. And in addition to the frost, I should say that fog patches are possible in lots of sections of southern Manitoba tonight, including in Westman, where we are going to see some of the coolest of the weather tonight in Manitoba, close to the freezing mark. If you're in around Brandon and Dauphin, and with those clear skies, a pretty good bet that we will see a little bit of frost developing there. For northern Manitoba, actually not a bad night overnight tonight. We're looking for temperatures, some of the warmest temperatures in the province are going to be here, up around 5 to 10 degrees in western sections. A little bit breezy at times in the far north as a low pressure system passes by you there. But tomorrow, quite a nice day. These temperatures above seasonal, well above in some cases for this time of year, close to 20 degrees along the western side of the region and getting into the upper teens as you head your way eastward. For southwestern Manitoba, I think temperatures going to rebound nicely tomorrow, kind of in those upper teens. A little further north in the parklands around Swan River, I think that's your best chance of seeing maybe a 20-degree temperature. But a big theme for all of us tomorrow, of course, remains the sunshine, and that, of course, is also the case for Winnipeg and portions of the southeast, 17 to 19 degrees. The same cannot be said, though, for northwestern Ontario. Another kind of cloudier day for you folks tomorrow, and you'll be sitting back a little bit temperature-wise, to maybe only in kind of those mid-teens. But for Winnipeg, sunshine definitely on the menu, starting around 7 degrees tomorrow morning. Those nice light winds out of the east around 12 kilometers an hour or so. Heading into the afternoon, tomorrow we're looking for sunshine to stick around, too. Again, I think an afternoon temperature probably approaching 18 degrees or so, and those southeast winds around 11, gusting to around 20 kilometers an hour. Your a full 7-day forecast, Janet, is coming up in a little bit.
Thanks, Ethan. Yes, Ethan will be back with our 7-day, but even before that, Here he is again in his other role, other hat he wears as a reporter. As you well know, inflation has been making it very difficult for many people to afford the groceries they need to buy. Some producers and retailers are trying to find ways to also prevent food waste. Let's put those things together and you get a program that is available here in Manitoba. And as Ethan shows us, it's making a difference in Saskatchewan too.
Tim Schultz can't always sell all the food in his store, even if it's still good enough to eat. The owner of Local Market in Regina, Schultz tries to reuse his food as much as possible, but some still ends up in the garbage.
We might have thrown out 25 to 50 pounds a week or something like that when it all added up.
Now, Schultz has another way to keep that food out of the trash, a food waste reduction app that just launched here in the last month. It allows retailers to put usable surplus food together in packages that can be sold to customers at a reduced price. It's just another tool to cut down on the impact of food waste, a big problem in Saskatchewan. A 2020 report showed the province produced the third highest amount of food waste per capita in Canada. And that has effects on our climate. Food waste produces methane, a potent greenhouse gas, when it's dumped in landfills. And estimates from 2020 show over a quarter of all methane emissions in Canada came from the waste industry. Food waste isn't just an environmental issue. Regina Food Bank CEO John Bailey says it impacts food security too.
If it means that folks that are struggling to make ends meet are able to purchase at a reduced price instead of visiting a food bank, we're all for it.
But Wanda Martin, an associate professor of nursing at the University of Saskatchewan, says although these apps are good for people looking for a deal, they don't necessarily help people who can't afford food at all.
The process is that you get a surprise bag. So if you're getting a surprise bag and you're putting money down for something, you don't know what it's going to be and how well you can consume that. That'll be a bit of a challenge for people that I am most concerned about, the people who are using charity food systems.
Back at Local Market, Tim Schultz is getting his next bag ready to sell. Although he doesn't make a lot of money through Too Good To Go sales, he says the products he's put on the app have sold quickly.
One of the people came to pick up and she said, these are harder to get than Taylor Swift tickets. So.
But when people are able to buy a bag, Schultz can feel good knowing he's making an impact on people and the planet. Ethan Williams, CBC News, Regina.
Something heavy slamming into the windshield has to be terrifying when you're driving. Watch what happened Saturday to a family on a Utah highway. Dashcam video shows a metal piece hitting the windshield. 5 people were inside that car, with 2 of them in the front. Amazingly, only one person sitting in the front passenger side was hurt. She suffered cuts on her legs from the flying glass. Turns out that object was the metal base of a chair. September 11th, an emotional day in the U.S., also for Chileans as well. The 50th anniversary of a deadly coup is marked by strong emotion and this violent protest in Santiago over the weekend. After the break, we'll hear why it's important for Manitoba's Chilean community to commemorate the coup in a peaceful way at the Franco-Manitoban Cultural Center tonight. We'll be right back. 50 years ago today, a coup overthrew the democratically elected government of Chile. Tonight, as we speak, a community of Manitobans who are originally from Chile are commemorating that 50-year anniversary. Bernardo Jorquera is chair of the committee that put together this event. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you to you.
Why is it important for the Chilean community to remember this anniversary?
Well, it's very important because if we forget about this, we're going to forget what to do in the future. And many things happen there that everybody had to remember that, or they have to know. We are commemorating the people who were murdered in Chile, the people who were tortured, the people that disappeared, and also we would like to thank all the people or the churches that helped us, an organization that helped us to come to Canada. And I want to remember there are maybe 500,000 Chileans that they went in exile. We live under dictatorship for 17 years, and people suffer, and people, many, they lost their job, and there was a new system of education in the way they wanted to educate the people, not to show the real history of Chile. Chile have been struggling from the 19th century, 1870 ahead, trying to have a better life. Many people have been killed until President Salvador Allende was elected president. He was elected democratically. And at the time they bombed the palace where he was, they killed the democracy in Chile.
In September 1973, were you there in Chile? And if so, what do you remember?
Well, the second day, I was detained by the military there. I spent maybe 9 months, once in different places. The last place was in Chacabuco, one of the most notorious concentration camps in Chile.
That's a terrible experience. Why were you detained?
They were detaining people everywhere, at the university, a factory, whatever. I was lucky that I was not in my place in Chuquicamata, where I used to work. I was working in Santiago at that time, and I was lucky I was not there because all my bosses, general manager, manager of production, destroyer manager, they disappear.
Yesterday, there was a protest, a large commemoration of people in Santiago walking. It turned violent with people throwing things at police and police using water cannons against the protesters. How do you feel when you see that violence today?
Well, that violence, they're doing that every day, September 11, because really they don't feel anything for the CUPE. Actually, there's someone supporting the CUPE, and they don't want that people commemorate those anniversaries. I watched that yesterday. I was watching, and most were detained, and they will pay for the disorder they made. And of course, I feel that still there are people in Chile that support Pinochet. That's for sure.
Still today.
Yes, exactly.
Sir, thank you for talking with us today, and have an important evening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Still ahead tonight, your daily lift and your 7-day forecast. We'll be right back.
Your vote, your way. Click, stream, watch, listen. Get the facts behind the spin before you go to the polls. Manitoba votes on CBC.
About seasonal for this time of year once again in Winnipeg tomorrow, a daytime high of 18 degrees, and that sunshine going to be sticking around for us for at least the next couple of days as we get a nice warm up heading into the kind of middle of next week with possible showers into Thursday. And then after that, sunshine remains a pretty consistent theme with temperatures into the low 20s, maybe even getting into the mid 20s by this time next week, and those overnight lows bumping up as well, Janet. So less of a chance of frost as we head through the week.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Ethan. For Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans, redemption was on the line this weekend, and many of them are still smiling over the way the annual Banjo Bowl played out on Saturday. That's our Daily Lift.
Nothing like Banjo Bowl. Banjo Bowl is just, it's a different level. Why? Because Saskatchewan, of course, and everybody hates Saskatchewan, the team.
I love the people and the partying and the food. Like this is it.
We're gonna kick the living snot out of those Prairie Riders today. It is not even gonna be close. Take my word for that.
Boy, was Bomber fan Jay Wilgosh right. He made that prediction before the game, and it turned out to be a resounding triumph for the Blue and Gold. 51-6 victory over the visiting Saskatchewan Roughriders. And with that, the Bombers clinch a playoff spot. And I just realized Bomber Green, that's not Bomber Green, it's Saskatchewan Green. I'm sorry.